unfortunately, John Slater beat me to the punch a little bit. Now, with that being said, I can still add a little bit more context to our speaker. When he was working for John, Roger applied heat flow measurements, topography, and gravity anomalies to study mid-ocean ridges. Afterwards, he went on to work at Lamont and has continued to apply those types of data to study, let's see here, downgoing slabs, intraplate deformation of the Central Indian Ocean, and back-arc basins. In addition, there is an entire laundry list of accomplishments that he's had, such as working to develop the smart electric grid of New York City, co-founding a pair of energy companies, and also a software company for 4D technology. His recent work has focused more on the petroleum industry, fluid migration, and reservoir management. So, without any further ado, Roger Anderson.
Never went any place to work that I knew what it was about. That was the secret to jumping around in all of those different places. It was really a quite fun career, embedding myself with companies that didn't even really know I was there for a few months. Anyway, I was very fortunate to come to Scripps. John said, "Come on out and start working for me." And I said, "I haven't even applied." He said, "Don't worry about that. We'll take care about that." I actually started as an extension student here and ended up in 3 years with a PhD. And I'm forever grateful for that. This is a picture of my two sons and John. My oldest son, Roger, is a big, tall guy. And he has his own company that he got the idea from by working in facilities management here at UCSD for 8 years. He went to Silicon Valley, created his own company, and now runs the infrastructure of how many universities in Cal State? 16. It's amazing. It's called Facilities Link, and it's really a great accomplishment. My middle boy, Jono now, he calls himself, worked for John Slater as an undergraduate for 3 years, I believe, something like that. And with Bob Fisher's help, mapped the pieces of Southwest and Southeast Indian ridges. And then went on to become a full partner in KPMG in strategy for working on future automobiles, including automation. To both of those guys and myself, we're all UCSD graduates, and Roger was an economics graduate at Columbia. Jono was a applied math graduate here at UCSD, and his daughter has just been admitted. Sarah, she's up here somewhere, has just been admitted to UCSD in applied math and economics. So 3 generations bound by the soul of the sea. Okay. Second, I have to prove to my wife that when I went to SEAL this time, I actually did some work. The funny thing about this picture is we're on the rig floor. Mark Langseth, who was my cohort at Lamont, and as you probably know, the seismic ship is named after him now. And look at my feet. I was wearing rubber shoes basically on the rig floor, which isn't known, but I was working. And I want to tribute to 2 old friends, long career life, spent many years at sea with both of them, who are both passed away. Jose Honorez and I, co-chief scientists on several of these drilling cruises, stayed lifelong friends. And Danny Hayes on the right. I had to teach him how, when you put a pinger on a dredge or a core, you can take the echo off the seafloor and actually figure out where you are in depth. Lamont didn't know that. I swear to God, they would just ram it down there until the cable went limp. They got a lot of cores and a lot of dredges, but they didn't know the physics of sound in the water. And then, of course, to Dan McKenzie is, probably, this article says he's the smartest man in the world. But actually, you should look at it. It compares his work in plate tectonics to that of inventing the DNA. Now, that's an exaggeration, but it's in the text. So look it up. Okay, let's get started with the talk. And I want to say something about the origin of this symposium, because it's really started at Lamont, where we had one 50-year really a reunion, which is what this is, 2 years ago. And my wife, on the front row here, said, you know, you should do this at Scripps. And my big buddy, Steve Candy, did the reverse of what I did. He gave a keynote address at Lamont, because that's where he was, but he's spent his career here at Scripps. I went to this seminar but didn't say anything because I didn't do anything with Lamont because I was here at Scripps. And that's why Hunter said, you should go out there, that way you'll get to give a talk. Anyway, the real highlight was the keynote given by Xavier. And he was somewhat unique in that he sat sabbatical at both Lamont and Scripps. Scripps' magic was you had all these outside people coming in all the time. Lamont was not like that. It was an insular place. I was the second person ever hired by Lamont from Scripps. Roger Larson, who's unfortunately passed also, was the first. And then Kim Castings was the third. And after that two man and a woman combination, they haven't hired anybody else since. That's not actually true, but it sounds good. And again, as John said earlier, Xavier made a really great starting comment. It was, Lamont had the data, but Scripps had the ideas. That took some balls. Nobody knew how Lamont was going to react to that, but everybody clapping and saying, that's really true, we're proud of that. Okay, here's the paper that I want to talk about, Gravity, Bathymetry, and Convection in the Earth. And I'm the co-author with two legends. And there's this little asterisk, which I blew up at the bottom. It says authors have been listed alphabetically. That occurred because the two authors both contributed equally themselves, but wanted to be senior author. And I had happened to read Isaacs, Oliver, and Sykes, where Sykes and Oliver were massive seismology legends, and they both contributed equally to that paper, but they both wanted to be senior author. And so Brian Isaacs, who was a graduate student at the time, that's right. Another good story. Don't I get to make up anything? tell when we get the questions what really happened.
Keep going, that's not true.
Now, one of the interesting things about being funded at this time 50 years ago is there was an enormous amount of money pouring into oceanography. And one of the major sources of that was the Office of Naval Research. And when you wrote a paper funded by Office of Naval Research, it was bounded, the reprints were bounded with a distribution list of where they went to in the Navy. And there's something really critical at the lower bottom. Usual people who probably didn't read any of this, but it went to the Navy Strategic Systems Navigation Facility in Brooklyn. First of all, nobody in New York knew there was such a thing. And second, it's going to be very important at the end of this, having to do with gravity, and why the Navy was so interested in mapping and understanding the Earth's seas and seafloor. Okay, here's Isaacs, Oliver, and Sykes. I guess I got that wrong.
But decided by lot.
Lot, and they got it exactly alphabetical.
And all three are in Oliver's list.
I love this picture, and when I first saw it, I have you recognize this big problem that Dan's been talking about. For the reason that we wrote this paper is it implies that there's upwelling at the ridge axis and that there's ridge push and trench pull. So the three competing or mixing of possible sources of why plate tectonics works. It's easy to understand the surface. It's very difficult to understand what's going on underneath it. So we had a look at something pretty simple, the Earth's gravity field. Now this was it when we did it. It was from Bill Kaula at UCLA, and it was when the first satellites were coming out, but most of this data that went into this map was from shipboard gravity. And it actually looked like this in the publication. And all those contours are low frequency gravity. There was no high frequency gravity really because the shipboard gravimeters weren't that good. My first job in doing this paper was to locate the ridge axis on this gravity map that Bill Kola had been so kind. I think John did a swap with him because he gave us the gravity map. You probably gave him a preprint of the Slater Anderson Bell or something like that. Anyway, there was a huge amount of cooperation and collaboration going on during this era with everybody who was engaged. There was no hoarding of data at Lamont even, as John pointed out. But how did I do this? I learned how to do it in Slater Anderson Bell because there was a machine in Ritter Hall, occupied an entire room in the basement. It was big and black. I don't remember the name of it, but you put say a publication you got from the library up on the screen, and you put a plate over to hold it tight, and then it would project that down onto a table where you could lay, say, a topography profile and overlay it with a magnetic anomaly profile. And in this case, had the gravity map out, and ridge axis maps were just coming into existence themselves, but they were way ahead of the gravity profiles because of the work of these three women that I'm going to show you in a second. And, okay, Jackie Memericks from here at Scripps was a huge friend and colleague of mine. We wrote 2 papers together, and she was just wonderful. And she was mapping the seafloor, where Scripps went. At Lamont, Ellen Herron was mapping the seafloor where Lamont went, and Marie Tharp was mapping the seafloor everywhere. And mostly with art, as an artist, she was drawing in from the influences of what was happening in plate tectonics. She was drawing in the ridge axes and the topography. And this map was published in 1977. We had just started getting access to the GPS gravity altimetry at the time. And this cartoon was drawn of herself by her. And when we talk tomorrow afternoon about women in science, these guys and several others were dominant operatives in plate tectonics back 50 years ago. Quite remarkable. Okay, what we actually did was to take the topography, the depth, let's call it depth, of the mid-ocean ridge all the way around the planet, wherever we could get data across these, and maps from everybody we could lay our hands on, and we made these maps. Where's my clicker now? I can't find it. There it is. Okay, we made these maps of depth of the axis of the mid-ocean ridge. Now, what were we trying to prove or disprove? We went in with the theory that if all of the most of the dominant papers at the time were correct. The mid-ocean ridge was a place of mantle upwelling below the ridge axis, and that you should have high gravity anomaly at the ridge axis everywhere you had mid-ocean ridge. Now that we knew was not right, and so we proposed to prove that it was wrong. And again, it was to do that, you had to match the gravity across the ridge axis. Now, the reason we did the ridge axis is we didn't have to correct its depth at all. We just read it off. If you go that way, you've got to worry about sediment thickness. The one thing that we quickly got to as affecting it are things like hot spots, which had come out only a year before Jason Morgan. And then we did have spreading rate from the magnetic anomalies that will be mapped on different maps. And I have to say, this is 50 years ago, so my memory might not be correct. So when you do the questions and answers, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. But the Pacific Ocean, equally well covered, and by the way, that cap is the Galapagos from the east-west running spreading center. It's not a gap in data. But there's clearly a big difference between this guy, which has a correlation with Iceland and with the Azores triple junction, and then a big trough of about 10 degrees north, and then gradually both depth and gravity gradually increasing. That's very different from this guy. There's, as we'll see, there's obviously no correlation between depth and gravity. In fact, there's Galapagos Islands, it's the opposite. Okay, here's the Southwest Indian Ridge. Again, we were finding these big gravity anomalies around the hotspots. It wasn't just the island. I'll show you. And this is the Central Indian, Southeast Indian Ridge, Southeast. I'm wearing the hat because the glare is making it difficult for me to read the screen. But we started plotting them up, and first we plotted gravity versus depth, and we got something of a correlation, not very good, but certainly in all of the oceans when it matched together the theoretical, which is the dashed line from Dan, and the error bars, which are the solid lines, regressions from population data, D versus BA. Now, that was we interpreted that as a positive correlation. Now, this is what we got from the other two. This is the Pacific Ocean, and well, it's each of the oceans, and it's not gravity versus depth, it's spreading rate versus depth. So one of the other thoughts in the literature was that the gravity anomalies at slow spreading ridges should be different. The spreading rate should produce different gravity and depths, because clearly the Atlantic was shallower than the Pacific. Well, those are the correlations that you see in the lower right. And as a prominent statistician at Columbia said, we made the mistake of doing some simple statistics on whether these curve fits were real or not, or whether statistically valid. And obviously, this is a no. Obviously, the first one was more of a yes. And then the third thing that we looked at was gravity versus spreading rate. And again, totally different. You don't even have to do statistics. The lady at Columbia, who's an expert in this, said you don't do it, just let them look at it. And that was what led us to keep track of this for a little while. There were two real monumental people who were working. So what was going on here with satellite altimetry, I need to tell you about. How much time do I have? 10 minutes? Okay, I got enough time to tell you this. The way that gravity is measured by satellites is you have, with the new GPS system, global positioning satellites, which were classified at the time, and I think somebody from MIT hacked the broadcasting code, and we were able to get in and see where the satellites were located. I say we, it was probably coming out of JPL. And do altimetry of the ocean water, top of the ocean, and that's a geoid, and it's sloshing around depending upon what the gravity anomaly is doing. The long wavelength gravity anomaly is doing to it. And it was long wavelength in. It was long wavelength in because there were very few GPS satellites. But every year there are more and more of them. And by this time I was at Vermont, and I had shared an office with Bill Haxby, who is famous, or was famous, for never publishing anything. But he was so brilliant that you'd go to him with the problem, and he'd drop everything and help you and do what he could for you. And he did publish one map, which is out of print at Vermont now. And I'll show his in a minute. Says he's got a copy of it, so I need to get a photograph and somehow recreate. This is the only map that is in Google. When you Google Bill Haxby, it's very bizarre. But anyway, you can see what we saw with the plots. Around Iceland, which is way up at the top, and then toward the Azores Triple Junction, all that yellow means it's shallow. The sea crest, the ridge crest is shallow, and we ignored everything but the ridge crest. And as you come down, you get these lumps of activity around the hot spots in the South Pacific. And then when you start swinging around the South Indian Ocean to the South Indian Ocean, you pick up a lot more shallowness. What the Pacific here is got holes in it. There's no ridge. And this is a better map because Dave must have had more data, or Bill was working on something else at the time. But you can see the same pattern showing up, and including the downwelling south of India, which is famous. And the difference here is that you're getting higher and higher frequencies because there are more and more satellites going up. And so this is Sandwell and Smith. And this is my favorite from now. This is what's on the NOAA page now. Bathymetry. Bathymetry is what they call it. But you can see it has even more high frequency stuff in it. So it's picking up the high frequency signal from the East Pacific Rise. The whole south of India has narrowed and been split by the 90s Ridge. But this is the best we have now with 50 years of technology improvement. And which brings me to why the Office of Naval Research was spending so much money on all of this. First of all, the funding was not just O&R, it was also NSF and these other significant players. And these federal agencies are all under siege right now, every one of them. Was the investment worth it? It's a good question, because they pile tons of money into oceanography. Now, I had to grab this because this is the new replacement for the Ohio-class submarines called USS Columbia, and I'm in Columbia. And there was an earlier version of an agenda that had me from Columbia, the country. So I wanted to put this in as Columbia University. But there's something really important here about why they were piling so much money into mapping the ocean floor. The submarine force is divided into two pieces. One are the attack submarines, and they go after the opponent. The other are the boomers, we call them, which are the nuclear submarines with Trident missiles. And they hide all the time. But they don't hide in one place. They hide and move around according to a roadmap that we have greatly helped create for them. And this roadmap changes from cruise to cruise, and it has to have two parts to navigate with. Their current navigation system uses gravity gradiometry, which is the tensor field of the gravity anomaly. And with that, you can see mountains, troughs, and you can see a path through difficult terrain. And you can develop a roadmap that's based on these two things. One is very highly developed images of the topography of the seafloor itself. And I put this in from Woods Hole because it wasn't just us at Scripps and us at Lamont. It was some really significant contributions from Woods Hole. In fact, several other universities that you know, U Washington, Ohio, Oregon State, and Rhode Island, and a few. And then you have, inside your submarine, you have a path you're supposed to follow through. This is the Straits of Molokai. I see the North Pole. We get here. And then there's this technology that produces these kind of maps, which are directional gradients from the tensor field. And the submarine follows this map, but it doesn't make any noise, so it can't map what the seafloor looks like using sonar. It's totally silent. What it needs is to have a map of the gravity gradient field, and then it can follow that by matching that with the gravity gradiometer that it carries inside itself. And with that, you can steer away from seamounts. You can steer away from the enemy, hopefully, and make yourself totally invisible. And with that, I'll end just one piece of why what we have done for 50 years is valuable and valuable enough to have funding from across several agencies within the U.S. government.